I'm John Gerard, and I'm going to speak today about the Pilgrim Paths. So you may wonder how I became involved with the Pilgrim Paths. Well, I've been a lifelong hill walker, and I was doing a bit of writing for the Irish Times, and then what happened was a publisher, the Collins Press in Cork, rang me up and they asked me to do a guidebook to Tipperary and Waterford, walking there. So I did that, happy enough, knew the walks very, very well, thought that was the end of it. And then my phone rang again about a year later and they said, will I do another guidebook? And I said, yeah, okay, I will. I said, well, what do you want me to do it on? And they said the Pilgrim Paths, and I said, whoa, I don't know too much about the Pilgrim Paths of Ireland. And they had a very, very low profile at that stage. But Con Collins said to me, well, I think this is the way things are going, and he was dead right. So I said, look, I'll think about it. So I came back to him and I said, I don't know an enormous amount of Pilgrim Paths of Ireland, but what I will do is I will walk them, and we will work on the assumption a sinner on the saint's road. In other words, what do I think of, you know, a person who is not deeply religious going along and looking at all these religious sites, how do they? So I would write it more or less as a travelogue. So we agreed on that, signed the contract, and so the first place I was off to then is where Christianity is supposed to have begun in Ireland, and that is Slemish Mountain, which is up in Antrim. So I went on up there. As you can see on the screen, it's a volcanic plug. It stands out, and you'll find that most of the mountains that stand out a lot in Ireland, we load them with mysticism and spirituality because they're there in our presence all the time. Everybody sees them and they bond communities. So I expected when I was going up to Slemish, I'd never been up it before, that I would see, as you'll see there on the screen, lots of people climbing up along it in pilgrimage. But I met a different type of pilgrimage when I went out around Ballymena, where the mountain is, and what I met was a group, this kind of a group, and this is a different type of pilgrimage, and it was an orange pilgrimage that blocked the road for a while. But I moved on then and got to the top, and what the interesting thing about getting to the top was that I expected to be a cross and a statue of St. Patrick and the Blessed Virgin and God only knows what, and there was nothing there. But I put this down then to be non-conformist. Ulster, as you know, they wouldn't be big into statues and things like that. I put it down to that. But I was back up in the glens of Antrim, and I asked the local historian there, what is the situation? And he said, the situation is this, he said, we have a cross and a statue of St. Patrick, he said, and he said, we're ready to put it up there, but we have been assured by the other side that if we put it up there, it will last about a week. So, okay, I said, well, what about the other side? Oh, they have one as well, he said. They have a statue and they have a cross as well as that. But we've assured them that if they put it up there, it'll last 24 hours. So that's the sort of community you have maybe in Northern Ireland. It was a good learning situation for me. So back in then to the south of the country, and the first route I did then is the Toher Forric, and that's the ancient route, and it's a lovely route to do, ancient route. If you want to enjoy it, you can walk it in about 2 days. And it's the ancient route linking, well, it actually linked the Rathcrogan, which was where the kings of Connacht had their palace, with what was then a sacred mountain, which is Cruachan-Agli, which is now Croagh Patrick. Today it runs from Ballintubber Abbey up to Croagh Patrick. So there we are, some of the paths along it, beautiful old medieval paths. You can feel this is exactly probably what a path would have looked like in the medieval period. And then of course, gradually then as you get closer, this mountain is there in front of you, a type of mystical mountain, standing out there on the horizon all the time. And then we get on further and we see there we come across people coming up the mountain. And as you can see there, this is it, they're all moving with common purpose and leaning almost slightly towards the destination. And in all my pilgrim walking, I have found that is something that was common to everyone. And there's one person then who did it in a different way and going up barefoot, the old tradition of pilgrimage. I actually said I'd have a go at that, and once I took off my boots and tried it, it lasted about 50 yards. So I'm obviously, you know, not destined for the highest place in heaven. But then we'll move on. So we'll look then at why people walk pilgrim paths. And I had plenty of time when I was out walking the paths to think about that. And the reason was summed up, I think, by the acronym DARES. And the first thing I think is discovery. And it's discovery. People want, it's mainly a personal or inner journey of self-discovery. That is the main thing. In other words, when you go to Spain on a pilgrim walk, you're not trying to really discover Spain. You're almost as much trying to discover things about yourself. appreciation for a favour bestowed. Something, you know, people will walk a pilgrim path because they have been cured of something, or somebody they know has been cured, or it might only be simply that someone who didn't do, you know, a stem of work, Johnny who didn't do a stem of work got 3 honours in his leave and said, wow, you know. And then remembering, that's a big one. It makes the paths very emotional. I think people will do it sometimes in memory of someone who can't be there, who's passed on, or who is ill. And you find at the end of most pilgrim paths, you'll notice that particularly if you're out in Santiago, from the Irish paths as well, there's actually a burst of emotion. Emotion is released there. And then there is escape, and I suppose that is it, and wellness and that, getting away from the mundanity of life. Life is so mundane for all of us, and you know, we're trying to keep 3 or 4 balls in the air, and when you get onto a pilgrim path, all you're really worried about is distance. What everybody discusses is distance, food and sleep. They are become the primary things in your life that everybody talks about. And whether you're Bill Gates or you have very in poverty, everybody faces exactly the same situation. And then simplification. In other words, it's a follow-on to that. Life is much simpler when you're on a pilgrim path. You're not keeping 6 balls in the air anymore. And there we are then on the top of Croagh Patrick, and a beautiful view across the Nephin Mountains over Clew Bay. Wonderful view, mystical, I suppose, has a spirituality in itself. And of course, if you look down at Clew Bay, I don't know how you exactly account them, whether it's the tide is in or out, but the idea is that there's an island in Clew Bay, 365 of them for every day of the year. We moved on then to Slemish, and this is the ancient route that would have brought people, not all pilgrims, most of them would come for learning, but they were coming to Clonmacnoise, which was the main monastic city in Ireland in the early Christian period, and they would have landed on the east coast and followed Slemish, an ancient path from the east coast that followed the Escariada, which was a very good way of walking, but it also raised people above the bog, didn't get stuck in the bog, and as well as that, pilgrimage was dangerous in those times, so the fact that you were high up was a good idea. You had a very good view, you could see, you know, danger approaching. So this is actually a cycle route because it's all along road. The Slee has now become a road, and so I thought this is a great idea. I'd cycle along and it should be fairly easy. But my old mountain bike was banjoed. So in the end we had only one bike at home, and that was my wife's old roadster. So I drug that out. This is the vision I had when I discovered it was a cycle route, but actually when I set off on the route, this is actually what I looked like. So there's quite a difference there. So we move on then up here, and there we are then to Clonmacnoise, right at the heart of Ireland, founded by St. Kieran. And St. Kieran was somebody who, you know, most of the monastic sites in Ireland are Glendalough, they're Glencullen Kill. They're in very isolated places, Gugan Barra, well out of the way. Kieran was a different kettle of fish, it seems to me, because he planted his monastic site right in the middle of Ireland, where the Escariada crossed the Shannon. There was a wooden bridge there, and then of course the Shannon itself was a great waterway with, you know, enormous amounts of transport on it at those days. In fact, I asked one historian how busy was the Shannon in the early Christian period, and he said you could describe it in those days as the M1 of Ireland. So then it was on to St. Kevin's Way, which is up in Wicklow, and Kevin is reputed to have been a very holy man who was in a monastic site in Tala, but having people around didn't really suit him. It stopped him communing with God. So he took off across the Wicklow Gap and of course discovered a wonderful Glendalough and lived in a cave there. But of course the idea backfired because he had such a reputation for holiness, people followed him, and eventually of course set up the monastic city at Glendalough. So there is the view of down of St. Kevin, looking over his path as it leaves Hollywood. And there then we are coming in then to Glendalough, and that's the great tower in Glendalough, one of about 70 or 80 towers that are virtually unique to Ireland, and they were probably built, some people say they were probably for defence, but I fancy they wouldn't have been the best for defence. They were probably more as a statement, this country is now Christian, this is a monastic site, and people for miles and miles around would be reminded of that. Then it was on down to Mount Brandon in Kerry, completely different terrain, you know, very, very rugged, challenging terrain. There I am making my way up the mountain, and that's the way up the mountain, and then you get to the top and there's a cross on top and some fantastic views there. So that's one side of the mountain, the ancient pilgrim route, which would have been the pilgrim route from the east. And then I went west to the Cosson and Nave, which starts at Ventry Beach. And why it's Ventry Beach? Because the Dingle Peninsula is a really rugged place. And most pilgrimage, even though people think of people walking in the early Christian period, like the Shannon, would have been by boat. So there's a lot of boats up and down the west coast of Ireland. But the Dingle Peninsula is very rough. It doesn't have many landing places. And so when you're talking about Mount Brandon being a sacred mountain, the nearest feasible landing place was actually at Ventry Beach. And there then is a route, totally unsanitized, and in a way that's almost great. You feel in touch with the past, and there I am doing it. And of course this is Gallerus Oratory, very early church. Nobody knows who built it, but it's about 1,000 years old, give or take, you know, 100 years. And the great thing about it is entirely built of stone. No stone has ever fallen out of it, and no drop of water has ever gotten inside it. But this is my favourite place on the route, Kilmalcader. Again, an early Christian site, but again I remember being there one evening and looking out, and you're looking right out over the last land in Ireland, and the sun was setting out there over the Atlantic, and you think this is a wonderful place. And you can see there at the front there's a Noam stone as well as that. You know, that's our early ancestors communicating with us as well. So it's a really mystical place, and I love that. And then it was on, then there's some of the views onto the other side of Mount Brandon. This time it was the Saints Road going on there, and there are some of the views again over the Three Sisters, out over Moriach. And down there then you'll see a small bit of water coming in there. You just see it on the right of the picture. There's a little creek coming in there, and that's Brandon Creek. And reputation is that it's from there that St. Brendan set out in his epic voyage. And many people believe he actually was the first European to reach America. And certainly it was possible because using the same type of boat in 1977, Tim Severton did exactly the same thing, and he managed to reach Newfoundland. So it may be true that not Christopher Columbus, but a Kerryman was the first European to reach the United States, to reach Newfoundland. And then we went on to St. Finbarr's Pilgrim Path in Cork. And a lovely, beautiful route. There's a lovely lake up on Mullameesha Mountain as well as that. Again, Finbarr came along there, and he came to Drimoleague, didn't like what he see, thought the people weren't religious enough, urged them to repent, and then said, follow me, and a lot of them followed him, and he continued on then and founded his monastic site at Gougaunbarra, really beautiful place, which today Gougaunbarra means, of course, the Rock of Barra. In other words, Finbarr. And I was passing along there, and there were standing stones out there, nobody around in the evening, and I just took that picture, and you think standing stones, yeah, you know, why the huge effort to build those? So the only reason you would want to build those is that future generations, you're communicating a message to future generations. I don't know what that message is, but I think everybody can take their own message from it. And then I came in there, and of course Gougaunbarra is associated with romance. Lots of people have had their weddings down there. This is what I expected to greet me when I went in there, but this is what actually greeted me, believe it or not, Highland cattle. And this was a bull standing right in the middle of my way in. So I had to be very careful there, treat with caution, so I had to go all around him and carefully avoid his herd. But eventually then, coming into Gougaunbarra then, and there's the view. And it was there at that stage, I said, even though it was a terrible day, I said, just struck me at that stage, my God, I've been walking all day and I haven't met one other person on the Pilgrim Paths of Ireland. Isn't it a pity? Surely we should have some organisation, some way of promoting the Pilgrim Paths of Ireland. The idea passed, but it was to come back to me later on. And then, of course, there, when you get in there, that's the beautiful oratory of St. Finbarr. And, of course, the great thing about Gougaunbarra is that even though it's a lovely place to visit, it hasn't conceded to mass tourism. It has its ancient charm, and you can feel in contact with the past when you're there. And then the next mountain, then, is most wouldn't have heard of it, was Cannot na Dobber. That's another one of the Pilgrim Mountains. And some of the most beautiful views in Ireland. There's a group going up above with Cunana Harbour below them. And then if we go there, we see on the top then the, there's a view, and that's a view right out over the Skelligs, it's out over Valentia, and from up there, I think it's the most fabulous viewing point in Ireland. Now, it's not 360, so you can't see everything there, but you're looking out, you can see over to the left as far as the West Cork, and then of course you have the Skellig Islands, you have Valentia, you have the great harbour coming into Carsiveen, and then if you have to look the other way, all of the Dingle Peninsula is laid out before you and behind you are the McGillicuddy Reefs and the Dunkerque Mountains. But I would say if you're doing that Pilgrim Path, it's a there and back path. It'll take you about 4 hours if you want to go up there. But the main thing is make sure you do it on a good day for the view. And there I am there up at what's called the Cannon's Cross, and there are stations across all the way up, and these were put up by a Canon Brosnan about 150 years ago. He built those. Now, and there then, I went out then at the very end to finish my pilgrim journey, and that I wrote about that as well in the book, and of course that's out to Skellig Michael, which of course has the ancient monastic site where, somehow, people would have gone out there, monks would have gone out there and managed to survive for about 400 or 500 years. And incredible, incredibly difficult because there's not even fresh water on the island. So they had to depend on collecting from rainwater. So, if you had a dry summer, that kind of thing, all kinds of problems, and living mainly from fishing and collecting soil and building their own little vegetable garden by scraping soil from all over the rock. Fantastic, but again a mystical place. And when I went there first, I remember first time I went there it cost me £10, but I think it's cost about €120 to get out there now. Thank you for the Star Wars for that. And then that's the first book I produced then, The Pilgrim Paths of Ireland, and that was the book that resulted from that. And then I was looking at this then, how do pilgrim routes differ from walking trails? That was a thing that I thought about as well. And I think they must be authentic. There must be a real feeling that you are walking in the footsteps of Pilgrim's Path. You don't need that if you're walking, we'll say, on the Kerry Way. It doesn't matter who went there before. It's the exercise, it's the scenery, it's that kind of thing. And then lead somewhere past generations have endowed with spirituality and mysticism. There must be a destination, Santiago, Croagh Patrick, Mount Brandon, whatever it is, but there must be a destination. Offers a contemplative or spiritual experience, something that touches you at a deeper level than your ordinary walk. As much an inner journey as a physical journey, okay? And in other words, most people who walk a pilgrim path, even if it's only a subconscious level, they are hoping that in some day at the end of the pilgrim journey, they will in some way have a new vision or be transformed in some way. And then the final thing is, connects you with an emotional level, not just another walk. And then we had a pilgrim passport then in 2016, and that links together. That was the first time we got a longer pilgrim path. And what we did was, we linked together in Pilgrim Paths Ireland, and I'm chairman of that now, we linked together the five of the principal pilgrim paths in Ireland. And those who complete those, then they get a Tastes Ilrachta, and that's the same thing as the Compostela. Except Compostela is Spanish, we use the Irish language, of course. A Tastes Ilrachta is roughly a completion certificate. And to claim a Tastes is necessary to walk 5 routes, total 120 kilometres. And that's what most people do anyway on the Camino in Spain. Obtain the local stamp and come forward the completed passport to Ballintubber Abbey, and they'll send you on that. So they're the 5 paths. I've been through them all on so far. St. Finbarr's Pilgrim Path in Cork, Canupna Carsiveen, County Kerry, Crossane and of Dingle, County Kerry, St. Kevin's Way then in Wicklow, and then by tradition most people complete then by doing the Tuatha Fóric, which is of course St. Patrick's Way, traditionally how he went to Croagh Patrick where he fasted on the summit for 40 days. And that's the Pilgrim Passport then, and that Pilgrim Passport then is available generally, it's available from Ballintubber Abbey, but if you look at pilgrimpath.ie you'll find lots of places like the Camino office and that where it's available, and that's the Tastes Ilrachta, what you will receive. And then we have St. Declan's Way then, which has reopened in 2021, and that's the great thing this year. It is just reopened, and there's been an enormous amount of interest in it, and I have been out with several groups and walked with several groups along it. It leads from the Rock of Cashel all the way down to Ardmore, and the tradition is that when Declan was first in Ireland, Waterford people say he was the first Christian in Ireland, and of course Declan was an Irishman, but he went to Rome and became a bishop. Then he came back, and then he discovered there was another fella, this time an English fellow in Ireland, and his name was Patrick, an Englishman in Ireland, and he was trying to convert the Irish. So there had to be some kind of a meeting. So Declan went and met Patrick, that's the tradition in Cashel, and they agreed that Patrick would not interfere with the Dacia. That's where Declan was. He would be the bishop of the Dacia, but he was not interested in going outside of that. And then he recognised Patrick as the primate of all Ireland, and that happened in Cashel. So it's a beautiful walk, St. Declan's Way, Ardmore, County Waterford, Cashel, County Tipperary, distance 115 kilometres, beautiful. I'd say if you really want to enjoy it, maybe 6 days walking. Ireland's longest pilgrim route, and it's linear, so it's one after another, and there's great antiquities along the way. You have Ardmore, Lismore, Mount Melleray Abbey goes through the Cistercian Abbey at Mount Melleray, Ladies Abbey, Care Castle, and the Rock of Cashel. So, and lots more besides along the way. And there is a group setting off from Cashel this year, setting off to do St. Declan's Way on the inaugural walk. And there then is some beautiful walking, and that's out along south of Care, and that's on the way south by the riverbank and on towards the Swiss Cottage. And then as you come through them, you see the Knockmeal Down Mountains ahead of you. As you're coming towards them, you're going across the Knockmeal Down Mountains, and they're a beautiful range of mountains. And then it's over the Crish. This is the ancient pass in the Knockmeal Down Mountains. And there then are some more people, a big group there, and they are actually heading towards Mount Melleray Abbey, okay? And there is Mount Melleray itself. And a lot of people, they have accommodation now. A lot of people will spend a night, two maybe, in Mount Melleray Abbey on their way down. It's a great kind of, it ties in with the whole idea of pilgrimage. Then there's Lady Louisa's Walk in Lismore, beautiful walk along the Blackwater. And Lady Louisa was one of the Devonshire family, and of course they would have been the owners, and still are, the owners of Lismore Castle. And then we go on down here. This is a strange thing, but you pass through this. This is the Hindu Gate, which is down in Villierstown, County Waterford. And actually what happened was, it was the local lord, apparently he was very popular, and he was into a kind of Indian architecture. And he went on honeymoon to Brighton. And to impress him when he came back and his new bride, the local people built this gate that he could pass through it. Okay, so he must have been extremely popular. And then there is some walking down near approaching Ardmore, and then there is this wonderful walk along the beach. That's how the walk in Ardmore, and with the round tower then is a beacon dead ahead. And then it's out along the cliff walk, superb walk there, and there we are then, and into Ardmore, County Waterford then, and that's where the whole thing finishes. And that's then is it. So that's what I have available then. That's the new St. Declan's Way. So there are 5 paths in Ireland, all about 20 kilometres, none of them too challenging, all fully waymarked. So they are something you could certainly do, or you could do bits of them, or you can do 115 kilometres of St. Declan's Way. But you remember, you can do it, you could come down, one weekend and do from Care to Cashel, and then come back 2 weeks later and do Care on to Goaten Bridge or wherever you're going. So, you can mix and match whatever way you like. But, certainly you don't have to go out to the Camino anymore. You can do a lot of pilgrim walking in Ireland. And that's my book now. So that's the book that's available. It's available in bookshops, it's available on Amazon, and it's also available from the publishers, Gill Books, if you want to buy it there. So, Gora Míle Maith Agad, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this, and maybe you will get out on the paths of Ireland.